So let's go ahead and look over. The book of Revelation is like an extension of the book of Acts. We've talked about Acts going right up to the Great Tribulation. Revelation pretty much picks up right there. Here, we read this last time. Let's, for context, read. And hopefully folks will get a glimpse of what we're going to do in Revelation. Revelation 12:1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. Remember, we talked about last time, that woman is Israel. Clothed with the sun and moon under her feet. Upon her head a crown of 12 stars. She being with child, that's Jesus, travaileth in birth, pain to be delivered. There appeared another wonder in heaven, behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads. We'll get into that we'll get into this in great detail when we get here in our study. His tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman. Remember, that's Israel. So the dragon here, Satan, stood before the woman. So we have a Johnny Bench stance down, ready to deliver this and devour the baby. Those of you who know baseball, I guess. The woman, which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Look at verse 5. And she brought forth the man-child. That's Jesus' birth in Bethlehem. What was he going to do? Notice my dispensationalist friends. Notice my futurist friends. There is a comma here. Instead of a comma, in other words, instead of the same sentence, they want to put a gigantic, gigantic barrier of thousands and thousands and thousands of years here. The Bible teaches that the birth of Jesus is at the same time as him ruling the nations. Now, folks have a problem with that because their belief system is if he was actually ruling, it would look different. But that's not the case. Remember Psalm 110? He rules in the midst of his enemies. The power of the gospel. Peter, put your sword away. We're not doing this thing by military might. It's going to be ruled by love and by faith. Though I speak with tongues of angels, 1 Corinthians 13, and have not love, have not charity, I'm nothing. We're going to rule this world through the power of the cross by love. Jesus is ruling the nations with a rod of iron. Look at this. It's the same time period. She brought forth a man-child. That's the birth of Bethlehem. He was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. That started after his ascension, Acts chapter 1. And her child, that's Jesus, was, look at this, folks, caught up onto God. That's Acts chapter 1, the ascension of Christ, and to his throne. Now, the scene, folks need to understand, the scenery there, if this was a movie, I could say, okay, cut camera, Revelation 12. Start camera, Daniel 7. That's the same scene as Daniel 7. I'll show you that in just a moment. But let's continue, because that's where we stopped last time. The woman, that's Israel, fled into the wilderness. Jesus said in Matthew 24, we're going to read this in just a little bit in our study down a little further. He's going to tell them when they see the Roman army surround Jerusalem that they are to flee into the wilderness of Judea. That is counterintuitive for a Jew. Jerusalem was a place you could live for probably up to 3 years with food, a series of tunnels that were like mazes. They could come up and sneak up on people. Jerusalem was almost impenetrable. It was almost impossible to take. And Jesus says, when you see the army starting to surround Jerusalem, I know, go into Jerusalem, go into the fortified city. No, that's not the instruction. The instruction is to go into the wilderness where there's no protection. Counterintuitive. All the people who are not listening to him are going to flee into what they think they should do, which is Jerusalem, and they're going to be destroyed. So the woman, that's Israel, look at this, after the birth of Christ and after his ascension, now we're post-ascension during the time period of the book of Acts, Israel's going to flee into the wilderness. That's what Jesus told them to do when he sees these things. He's going to have a place prepared for them by God, that they should feed her there. Look how long, Jimmy. How long is this? 1,203 days. It's 3.5 years. Exactly 42 months. Exactly the length of time that we see the Great Tribulation of the Roman-Jewish War when the Romans are overtaking Jerusalem.
That's the same amount of days that Josephus wrote down, too. 42
That's right.
months. I don't think he was reading the Bible at that point.
He wasn't a big fan of Christians.
Right.
He didn't have any reason to help us on that. There was a war in heaven. So now here people understand the picture. When Jesus ascends in Acts chapter 1, he's ascending to the Father, where Satan has access. Have you considered my servant Job? Hey, where have you been? Oh, going to and fro up and down the earth. He has access. Accusing, the accuser of the brethren. They didn't do that sacrifice right. That one doesn't count. He was like the worst, um, uh, criminal lawyer, like the slip and fall people. He's trying to find the frivolous lawsuits. And guess what? When Christ goes up in Acts chapter 1, there's a war in heaven. And Michael, I can probably imagine with a smile, goes over. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought against his angels. And guess who won that, guys? The dragon prevailed not, neither was there found their place found any more in heaven. He was kicked out of heaven. Where did he go after that? And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, just in case we don't miss it, which is deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, what do you guys think they would do once they were cast out of heaven in Acts chapter 1? Chaos. What does Jesus predict over the book of Acts? It's going to increasingly get more chaotic. Deception is going to run high. Why? Because Satan and his fallen angels are on the earth. And look at what it says. Now I heard the loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation. Folks, you know when heaven announced salvation has come? When Christ ascended on high, when he took his place at the right hand of the Father, when salvation has been offered to the whole world and anybody can call on his name and get saved. Heaven makes that announcement in Acts chapter 1 as Jesus is coronated and recognized as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now salvation has come, and strength, and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Messiah, Christ. What happened at that same time in Acts 1? The accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before God night and day. Isn't this simple? This is usually confusing passages. It's not when you have the right context. Now look what it says here. And they are the people on the earth. How did the people on the earth survive in such a situation? Well, they overcame him. How did they overcome the dragon with all of his fury? Here's how they did it. By the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto the death. So check this out. Therefore, rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Oh, there's a woe there to the inhabitants of the earth. Just like in Matthew 23. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that he hath but a short time. When the dragon saw that he was cast onto the earth, that is the time period of AD 30 to AD 70, he persecuted the woman, that's Israel, which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman they were given 2 wings of a great eagle. Now that's the ones that are in covenant, that she might fly into the wilderness. This is a quote from the Old Testament. I'll show you in a second. This great eagle that gives them wings to go into the wilderness, that she might fly in the wilderness into her place where she's nourished. For guess how long, folks? A time, that's 1. Times, that's plural of 2. That's 1 plus 2 is 3. And half a time, that's 3.5. What are they hiding from? The face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. The end thereof is with a flood, it says in Daniel 9:27. The earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. The dragon was wroth with the woman. You think? Satan was mad at those in covenant and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. There's that remnant word we had in our understanding of the 2 covenants of Abraham and Mosaic covenant. What did they do? They keep the commandments of God, and notice what that means now. They have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and pause there for just a second. Hopefully, light bulbs are going off for people to connect all this stuff. Let's go over to Exodus chapter 19 and verses 3 through 6. Here was the quote from Revelation 12. Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, how I bear you on eagle's wings. So there is a connection between the 10 plagues and the idea of 10 in the Bible is a complete divine list. In fact, if you look at the days of creation, there are 10 acts of creation. I know there's 6 days of creative works, but there are 10 major statements of creation. It's a masking that God is putting between him and creation, that you could enjoy his creation and really deny him. He's masking himself. It's layers from the creator to the creation. And this masking there, you have a choice where you can say, I don't really think there's anything here. I'm an atheist. You have that choice. He's not in the same room. He's masked himself. Well, in the days of the 10 plagues of Egypt, he decreated, means he made himself known. We'll do a study on that another time. But each of the 10 plagues they're not throwaway plagues in Exodus. Each of those 10 plagues are reversing the days and the acts of creation, reversing creation. That's why it's all in decreation language. The sun won't shine. These things are going to fall down. And he's doing that to show himself. If the acts of creation are to mask himself, then decreation language is to show himself. And so he's doing the same thing we see in Revelation that he did in Exodus. He's the new Moses. He's delivering his people out of slavery by baptizing them through the Red Sea. And where are they to go now after their baptism of the Holy Spirit? Into the wilderness. What was the story in Exodus? They went into the wilderness. For how long? 40 years. That's the length of trial. Okay? No wonder he said, you endure to the end, you'll be saved. We'll get into that in a second. But I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you into myself. That's what he's saying. You're going to get on eagle's wings, Revelation 12. I'm going to bring you into a place that I prepared for you. I'm going to nourish you for a length of 3.5 years, 42 months. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed. Notice that? If, contingency. And keep my covenant. Then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. Who's he talking to? You shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. That's what Peter calls us now in Christ. We are now the ecclesia. Those in Christ are now the kingdom of priests, a holy nation. Okay? So all of this works together when you start understanding what's going on in the broader picture. Let's head back to Matthew 24.
I was going to say, weren't we doing a Matthew 24 study here?
We are doing a Matthew 24. Look, this is what we've gone over. There was 10 statements that begin here. All the other 9 start with the word and. Okay? These are 10 statements just lining up with the 10 acts of creation, the 10 commandments, the 10 plagues of Exodus. These all line up with a divine, complete list that God is changing something. When he says all of these things right here, deceive many, he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. All these ideas have the concept of, when we see in the book of Acts, all these Judaizers are coming in because these are the ones that have been scandalized. These are the offended ones. But when we get to Revelation 12, we see why this happened. Because at the ascension of Christ, Satan is kicked out of heaven. He's come down. He starts making a total mess and a disaster. That's why so many people are deceived and false prophets arrive. The iniquity shall abound and the love of many shall wax cold. So all of this works together with the ascension of Christ, him leaving his spirit to guide those who want to be saved, and that Satan is just running rampant on the earth during this time because he's upset about the faithful remnant of God.
Let me ask you something, because I know somebody
Sure.
may have this question.
Sure, yeah.
So before Satan was kicked out of heaven, he still could go back and forth. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was on earth messing with Jesus even.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
And what about he entered into Judas, and
Yeah.
so he had
Back and forth.
access both realms, right?
That's right.
But at the ascension, you're saying he lost access to heaven and he was strictly down here on the earth.
Correct. When Jesus says, and I'll just show it again, when Jesus says in Matthew 28, verse 18, he says, I have been given all powers given unto me in heaven.
Yeah.
That's the point of me emphasizing that.
Yeah. Okay.
And on earth. So
I just wanted to clarify that.
No, I appreciate you asking. So Satan is kicked out of heaven here. Where does he go? Goes to the earth. But guess what? Jesus has jurisdiction there as well. So the gospel spreads, and even in the middle of all this.
So this is the definition. I think this would be the definition of Satan being bound.
Yes.
because he doesn't have the power he used to have,
That's
and
correct.
his main power, if any, is just deception now at this point.
Well, he can't deceive the nations as a whole because Jesus took that away from him.
And
Part of
by
him
the
being bound
spreading
is
of the gospel, I mean,
correct.
it's not being hidden from anybody anymore. Everybody can
That's correct.
access it.
Now, I know people are saying, but there's still deception today. There is deception today, a lot of deception, but it's a deception of those who want to reject the gospel. Remember, we talk about him being
Outside of the salvation shelter.
outside of the salvation shelter. That's
You're in the
absolutely right.
storm. You're vulnerable to the storm. You're vulnerable to
Where you will
anything from
perish.
the enemy. You get inside that salvation shelter and you're safe.
Outside the shelter, you're deceived, you're destroyed, you perish. Inside the shelter, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. That's why he has to seeking whom he may devour. He doesn't have a choice. He's not saying, oh, today I destroy Ken. No, he's looking for the one gazelle that's limping outside the pack.
Mm-hmm.
He's seeking for that person whom he may devour. He doesn't just pick. And the one about people always quote about him being the God of this world, look at the context. To them whose minds are blinded that have rejected the gospel.
Right.
He
Outside of the
doesn't have
salvation shelter.
outside of the salvation shelter. That's right.
Hmm.
So yes, there is deception by those who reject Christ. So simply stated, if you reject the gospel, you're not going to know what you're doing spiritually.
Hmm.
And that's what it comes down to. So he that endures to the end. Now, I don't believe this is talking about the end of the tribulation period, because a lot of people were killed before that. This is probably the end of whatever it is for them. If it's the end of the tribulation period, great. But it could also just mean simply the end of their life. But look at Luke chapter 8, verse 11. This is right after Jesus gives the parable of the seeds and throwing the sower and the seeds. They asked him what he meant by it. So he gives the answer. Now, this is the parable's this. The seed is the word of God. Now listen to what he says. Those that are by the wayside are they that hear. Then cometh the devil, taketh away the word out of their hearts, lest they should believe and be saved. So some, they see it or they hear it, but they don't believe it. Okay, that's one group. They on the rock are they, which when they hear, they receive the word with joy. Now we have a group here that actually hears the gospel and receives the gospel and is joyful about receiving the gospel. But it's all very new to them. Jesus says it this way: these have no root. Now, many have argued that these people didn't actually believe. But the problem with that is Jesus, in his explanation here, says they did receive the word with joy. But here's the problem Jesus is pointing out: these have no root. Look what it says: which for a while believe, and they believe with joy for a while, but in the time of temptation they fall away. So this is a very good description of that time period of 80. It could be a description of people now too, but of 80-30 to 80-70. They were new to the faith. Things started getting crazy, and they didn't have enough roots in it. They were brand new believers, and they started to fall away. So we do have that understanding of enduring to the end to be saved.
And that could have been Jewish believers or Gentile believers.
It doesn't, yeah, whoever's receiving it.
Yeah.
So that's what I think on verse 13. Let's get to this last part here. Matthew 24:14, and the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now again, the end is relative to whatever our topic is. The end of what? The end of the Judaic age, as we've gone over so many times. But now, isn't this a massive problem for the way that we're teaching? I mean, goodness, look what Jesus is saying. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world before the end comes.
Well, there's no way that happened.
There's no way, because I know for a fact they didn't make their way to Mexico. Right. They didn't make their way to the United States. They didn't make their way to Canada. I'm pretty sure they didn't find Japan or Hawaii, being islands. So obviously the end has not happened yet because the gospel wasn't preached in all the world. Now that might sound pretty convincing until one thing. We use the Bible as both our glossary and our dictionary.
There you go again.
I know it. We got to do that. By the way, let me show people this. We're almost through here. So let me show something. Let me go a little. Is that okay? Can you see that, Jimmy?
Yep, I can see it.
So he preached in all the world. Now, sometimes the world is cosmos. That's referring more to the earth. But sometimes this word right here, it's called oikumene. Oikumene. That's the word that's translated as world. Oikumene has the idea of the known world in the Roman Empire. Let me click on this so people can see. The inhabited world, the portion of the earth inhabited by the Greeks. Now, this is not Bible right here, so you can't always go by this, but this is the pretty well accepted terminology. The Roman Empire, all the subjects of the empire. This is what it usually is talking about. Every great once in a while, it's talking about the whole universe, but for the most part, it's talking about the Roman Empire. Let me give you a couple of examples.
I like it when you pronounce the Greek words.
Oikumene. Yeah, that's a good one.
Remember that time you pronounced the Greek word for woe?
Yes. I want to say hoorah, but it's,
yeah.
There it is.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's uai.
Uai.
Uai. Woe unto you, uai. See, folks, if anybody wants to complain the videos are too long, remember, Jimmy has caused us to rabbit trail.
Oh, sure, it's my fault.
Of course it is.
You know, when I edit these and I time up all of my words,
don't say
they
it.
equal
don't
2 minutes. No wonder your voice is gone.
Yeah, exactly. Luke chapter 2, verse 1. It came to pass in those days, there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the, what word do we think that is? That's oikumene. They weren't taxing America. They weren't taxing Cuba or Mexico. It was the world that they had at the time.
Yeah, Caesar Augustus could only demand that over the areas that he ruled, which was the Roman Empire.
Perfectly stated. So we would connect his name with just the Roman Empire. Acts 11, verse 28. There stood up one of them named Agabus and signified by the Spirit that there should be a great dearth throughout all the earth. We've already quoted this. There's the famine. And notice again, it's connected to Claudius Caesar. So we have the word world here, and it's connected to a famine throughout the area of Claudius Caesar. So there's more that we could go over. I guess I'll just do one more just for fun. I said that, but there's one after this I want to do too. My blaming you is not going over too well. Look at this. I'll just cut to the chase. Whom all Asia, that's the area above Israel, that we would know as Turkey or Asia Minor. It's not the continent, folks. Just so you know that it's the Roman-controlled province of Asia.
That's where all the churches of the Book of Revelation were in. They were
chapters 2 and 3.
That was that whole Antioch, right? Asia Minor. They're in Turkey.
Yep, going up that horseshoe path of those 7 churches. And look what it says, and the world worshipeth. Okay, we'll do one in here in Romans chapter 10 and verse 18. He says, but I say, have they not heard? Yes, verily their sound went into all the earth, their words into the ends of the world. Now here, we're talking about the gospel. And this, interestingly, is actually, let's look at this real quick. This one is talking about all the ends of the oikumene. So we have that same word here, oikumene. Now, one more here in Colossians 1.
There's a couple times in Colossians 1, right?
There's a couple. Yeah, there's Colossians 1:23. Look at 23. If you continue in the faith grounded and settled, be not moved away from the hope of the gospel, which you have heard and which was preached to every creature which is under heaven. Is Paul saying here that he found all of the cows in Florida and preached the gospel to them? That's what it says.
I know.
Of course not. No, it's saying that all of the people of the earth had at this point heard the gospel. Of course, we're talking about the oikumene. Here's verses 5 and 6. For the hope which is laid up for you in heaven, whereof you have heard in the word of truth of the gospel, which is come unto you, as it is in all the world. So we could go on, but that's good for now. I want to show one last thing, and I know that we're just absolutely going too long here. So thank you for everybody staying with it. If you're still at this point, congratulations. I want you to notice a very interesting point here. Jesus says that the kingdom shall be preached for a witness. This is in terms of before a judicial punishment. Okay?
Okay.
It's a singular witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. I want you guys to notice the structure of his argument compared to this, comparing it to Matthew 28 at the Great Commission. Totally different. All power is given to me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore, teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I commanded you. In Matthew 24, the gospel goes out by a way of, I wouldn't say God protecting himself, but by a way of his judicial command is saying, you've all heard, and now the end is here. Compare that to Matthew 28, where he says, guys, I want you to go to people and teach them, baptize them, teach them all the things that I told you. In other words, disciple them. Totally different instructions. This has the idea of seeing the gospel be personalized to people, not just a way of justifying wrath, but actually seeing the globalization of Christianity. Different. I'm going to real quickly go to our last thing for today in Daniel 7. Now let's keep in mind what's going on. In the first century, Jesus is working in an area where it's controlled by the Roman government, the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is spoken of as the sea beast in Revelation 13. I'm not proving that right now. I'll go over that another time. And then we have left here this strange guardian relationship of this beast with Christians. They were actually protective. God used this guardian beast to protect Christians during this time period. In Daniel chapter 7, we have basically a timeline of everything that we've been reading tonight. Daniel sees four beasts. These are successive kingdoms. Let me show you what's going on here. Verse number 7, after this I saw in the night visions, behold, the fourth beast. Now that's Rome. Dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. Remember, Rome, we always associate with iron. It devoured and brake in pieces, stamped the residue with the feet of it. It was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. We will get into all that when we do our Revelation study, much more detail. I considered the horns, so Daniel's trying to make sense of this. I considered the horns. Behold, there came up among them another little horn. We'll get into it later. Before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Behold, the horns were like the eyes of a man, a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till thrones were cast down. That's the destruction of this image. How did that happen? The Ancient of Days, that's the Father, did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was pure like wool. His throne was like the fiery flames, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream came forth from before him. Thousands of thousands ministered unto him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. See, we have our Hebraic thousands here. It means many, 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 many. You're not supposed to get your calculator out and go, oh, I know that number. It means a massive number. It's the way 1,000 is used in the Bible. The judgment was set, the books were open. So here's the moment, guys. Jesus ascends in Acts chapter 1. The books are open in a courtroom setting. There's a hush. And then behold, the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain. That's after AD 70. Because Rome goes on for a while and the Christians take them out. Not physically, but they overpower them with the gospel. His body's destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. Yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. They were still nations, but they didn't have the power. Folks might be saying, Ken, how do you know the timing of this? Look at verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, that's Jesus. He came with the clouds of heaven and came to, where was he doing? Where was he coming from? The earth, Acts chapter 1, going up to the Father. And he came to the Ancient of Days. He is not going down from, he is going to. He's going up, not down. He came to the Ancient of Days. That's Acts chapter 1 in the Ascension. They brought him near before him. So they ushered, if you can imagine in Acts chapter 1, that scene that goes up, cut, Daniel 7:13. Now the cameras from heaven seeing him come up. The angels usher him before the Father in verse 14. And what do? At that moment of Christ's ascension, the king is being coronated. And there was given him dominion. What did he say in Acts chapter 28? Behold, all power has been given unto me. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. There was given him dominion. Christ took back dominion and glory. That's the glory is the idea of the presence of the tabernacle, the presence of the temple, and a kingdom. That's me and you. Exciting. That all people, nations, and languages should serve him. That's a global, not just Hebrew, not just Israelites, global. All nations, all nations. That word nations in the Old Testament is Gentiles. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. No one's going to take Christ's rule away, which shall not pass away. His kingdom, that which shall not be destroyed. But Daniel's sitting there. He's going, okay, these beasts are taken out. What's the deal with this fourth beast? It's troubling Daniel. It's Rome. And Daniel doesn't understand it. You and I have such an advantage on this side of the cross. Daniel had no idea.
Yeah, Rome didn't exist yet, right?
No, they certainly didn't have this power. So he says, I was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, the visions of the head, it troubled. What's going on here?
He was still dealing with the head of that statue, right?
Yeah.
Babylon,
look at
Nebuchadnezzar.
That's right. Look at chapter 2 for those that want to see that.
Yeah, he had to go through 4 different dynasties of power.
Yeah, and he was stuck in the first one.
Now.
Yeah, Babylon, Medes and Persians, the Grecians. That's Alexander the Great, the intertestamental period. That's the book of Second Maccabees, if you want to check out what was going on. And then the Romans were the legs of iron. He says, I came near unto one of them. Oh, and by the way, what's the end of Daniel 2? That little stone made without hands. That's the virgin birth, comes out of the mountain, strikes the image on the foot. The image falls over. And what happens to that little stone, guys? It grows in and becomes a mighty mountain. That's the gospel spreading over time. So he says, I came near to one of them that stood by me, and I asked him of the truth of all this. So he told me and made me known the interpretation. So Daniel goes over in the middle of this courtroom. He's like, hey, man, you know what's going on right now? Verse 17, these great beasts, which are four kings. We get that interpretation. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. This guy goes, yeah, you see the king on the throne? He's giving his kingdom forever and ever. They're going to possess it forever and ever. He's going to give it to the saints that are in his kingdom. But Daniel goes, but I still have a question about that fourth beast. The one that's still going on right now. I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped residue with his feet. I mean, a horrific image. He has 10 horns that were on his head, and of them which came up before whom 3 fell off. We will get into all of this when we get a little further in our Revelation. All of this will make sense. It's just very easy to understand when you get it. I'm not saying it's not cryptic. It is, but we can understand it. Okay, verse 21. He says, I beheld the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until when? The Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Now, this is probably right around the destruction of the temple and God's presence poured out in Acts chapter 2. All of these things are happening where the saints are given control. And we have dominion of the whole earth right now through the power of Christ. Hey, you want to change politics? Man, start witnessing to your neighbors. Start a prayer service at your local capital, whatever you want to do. We have the power to do this. Verse 23. The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. That's Rome, which shall be diverse from all the kingdoms and shall devour the whole earth and tread it down and break it in pieces. The 10 horns out of the kingdom or 10 kings. Will identify all of them as we get going. Another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first. He shall subdue the 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until, how long, guys? A time. Times, that's 1 plus 2, and a dividing of a time, that's 3.5. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And to the kingdom of dominions and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. This is talking about the transition time of Christ coming and ending the reign of the kingdoms. All dominion is given to him when he ascends in Acts chapter 1. He's given the nations as his inheritance. Satan is kicked out, Revelation 2. And there's complete chaos on the earth from AD 30 to AD 70 at the culmination of, get this, we're almost done, but this is if you're still watching this long video, God used both the land beast, that's Israel, and the sea beast, that's Rome. Their purposes were done when the Messiah ascended into heaven and the temple was destroyed. Their purposes were done away with at that time. And God moved on to his plan in the new covenant. All right, so what we've covered is these 10 statements about things getting worse and worse. Endure to the end, you'll be saved. And the gospel of this kingdom is preached in all the world for a witness, and then the end shall come. The end of what? It's the end of the Judaic age. It's a sign of his coming, the destruction of the temple. When will these things be? So hopefully it's starting to make a little bit more sense to folks, and we'll pick up next time in verse number 15 with the oft misunderstood phrase, the abomination of desolation, again spoken by Daniel. We'll get into that next time.
If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.